Think of a scale. Anything beyond 80 is devious, and also below 65, you risk become passive and irrelevant. The Zeta is the lone wolf who operates at 75 to 90 on the scale. All fangs, no faith. Even when the pack calls him back, he snarls. No doubt, Zetas are powerful. We established that in many of our previous videos, but here we want to show the opposite side of the coin. Zetas, who cross the safety line of devilishness. The Sigma is the tiger. We mistake them as lone wolves. He hunts alone, not out of spite, but instinct. Fluid, unbound, and adaptable. He needs no herd by default, doesn't burn the forest to prove he is the king. Tigers don't reject the jungle. They simply move through it on their own terms, like a real king. This 5-chapter video about the Zeta's curse and quiet flame of untapped potential. Their extremes can raise empires or forge them. They mirror our darkest impulses. The seduction of total control, the lie of total independence. Storms aren't evil, they're forces. The question is, will you drown in yours or learn to sail? Chapter 1. The Mask That Cracks. Have you ever felt that gnawing hunger for control? That whisper promising you'd finally be safe, if only others feared you more? We mistake thorns for armor. The Zeta stands at the precipice of a dangerous cliff, convinced that what burns inside them, rage, insecurity, the need to dominate, represents true strength, rather than wounds, crying for attention. They operate in the upper registers of manipulation and callousness, wearing toxicity like a badge of honor while calling it tactical advantage. Imagine a traveler who prides himself on never asking for water, convinced that thirst is a weakness. He marches through a desert until his lips split and vision blurs. In the same way, a Zeta wears arrogance as armor, mistaking the echo of its own voice for power. They sit high on the scale of cunning and charm, yet their tower is built on shifting sand. At its core, this is a refusal to accept our darker moments. A Zeta will twist relationships like clay to prove control, but that control is brittle. When the clay dries, it cracks. Studies like the 1999 Dunning-Kruger experiment showed that those who overestimate their skill crash hardest when reality intervenes. The more they boast, the steeper their fall. Consider how a dam collects pressure behind its wall. Every unacknowledged fear, every ignored doubt, is water piling up. One day, that wall breaks with a roar, and the flood takes everything downstream. This is what happens when the hidden side of ourselves, our so-called shadow, goes unseen. It does not disappear. It grows until it shatters our carefully crafted image. The pattern repeats across relationships, careers, and internal lives. What appears initially as advantage, the willingness to cross boundaries others respect, the freedom from emotional entanglement, ultimately reveals itself as quicksand. The more the Zeta struggles against their growing isolation by embracing further callousness, the faster they sink. This is not morality, but mechanics. Reality operates on principles deeper than temporary advantage. Those parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, our need for connection, our fundamental vulnerability, don't disappear but instead transform into unconscious architects of our undoing. The worst chains are those we mistake for wings. The ancient Stoics understood this paradox. True power never comes from domination, but from integration. The courage to face all aspects of oneself without flinching. The Zeta's tragedy isn't their darkness. Everyone carries shadows. Their tragedy lies in believing those shadows are their only legitimate strength. Stoics teach that pain is neither good nor bad. It simply reveals what we refuse to face. Denial breeds disaster, because true strength comes from naming what scares us. In the coming chapters, we will explore how to peer into that dark water without drowning, and how to rebuild our dam with honesty rather than fear. Are you ready to meet the parts of yourself you've kept behind locked doors? Power isn't the absence of weakness. It's the courage to hold it in your hands and say, "This too belongs to me." Build bridges, not fortresses. The strongest minds are not stone, but water, shaping, adapting, flowing. Even the deepest river started as a crack in the earth. Chapter 2. the mirage of unfelt scars. Their strength often lies in sharp minds and cold strategy, operating on higher lines and dominance traits like manipulation, calculated detachment, and intolerance for social formality. But what happens when the world resists that control? That's when Zetas begin to collapse, not because they lack power, but because their identity is too entangled with having it. This mindset, in small doses, can breed great success, but in extremes, it becomes a fragile empire, inflexible, rigid, cracking under pressure. In psychology, this collapse aligns with what's known as ego depletion, a theory proposed by Baumeister in 1998. When someone constantly uses willpower or manipulation to manage impressions, they burn out faster. They lose the ability to regulate emotions or think clearly, especially when things no longer respond to their design. Have you ever numbed a wound so deeply you forgot it existed until it began to rot? Imagine a warrior who walks through battlefields untouched, or so he claims. He wears his scars as trophies, never acknowledging the infections festering. Zetas are masters of this delusion. They mistake numbness for resilience, burying pain under layers of control. On the surface, they appear invincible, untouched by doubt, unshaken by loss. But beneath lies a void they refuse to name. The executive who works 18-hour days, silencing her loneliness with ambition. She thrives on praise, yet crumbles when criticized. Her colleagues call her ruthless. Her family calls her absent. She believes exhaustion is proof of her grit. But grit, as the Stoics taught, is endurance with purpose, not a blind sprint into oblivion. The Zeta confuses motion with direction, mistaking the act of running for the path forward. Studies on emotional avoidance by Gross in 2015 reveal a paradox. Suppressing pain amplifies it. Like a river dammed, emotions swell until they break through. Zetas build dams of distraction, power, manipulation, isolation, but the flood always comes. A 2021 meta-analysis found individuals high in Machiavellian traits reported 34% higher rates of chronic stress when refusing to address emotional triggers. The body keeps score, even when the mind lies. There's a story of a sword forged in fire, but never cooled. It gleams fiercely, yes, but strike it once, and it shatters. This is the Zeta psyche. Rigidity masquerades as strength, but true resilience is forged in cycles of heat and rest, action and reflection. The Stoic sage, Epictetus, born a slave, understood this. Strength isn't the absence of suffering. It's the art of transforming suffering into wisdom. Ask yourself, what rot are you ignoring beneath your armor? A wound unexamined doesn't heal, it metastasizes. The parent who buries grief in anger, the friend who replaces trust with sarcasm, the leader who confuses fear with respect, all are Zetas in disguise. Pain is not weakness, it's a messenger. To silence it is to sever the nerve that connects your mind to your soul. The Stoic doesn't pray for a life without storms, they learn to read the sky. Your cracks are not failures, they are maps. They show you where to mend, where to grow, where to soften. A tree that never bends doesn't conquer the wind, it merely forgets how to feel it. And one day, when the storm comes, it forgets how to survive. Chapter 3. The Loneliness of Unseen Kings. How heavy is the crown you never take off? Unlike the Sigma, who maintains some grounding connection to authentic community and self-awareness, operating in the 65 to 80 range in a scale of manipulation, narcissism, and Machiavellianism, though it is also high but within safe limits. But the Zeta pushes further into isolation and deviousness, mistaking it for transcendence and power. This is not mere personality variation, but a fundamental misreading of human nature. Ruler who sits alone in a hall of mirrors, each reflection shows him a version of himself, sharp, untouchable, revered. But mirrors don't speak back. Zetas crown themselves monarchs of isolation, mistaking solitude for sovereignty. They build thrones from the belief that needing nothing is the same as having everything. Yet hunger persists, even when denied. Consider the artist who creates only for acclaim. He scorns collaboration, fearing others might dilute his vision. His work grows repetitive, hollow. Critics praise his consistency. Strangers call it stale. He mistakes isolation for purity, not realizing innovation thrives in the friction of differing minds. The Zeta's kingdom is a gilded cage, where admiration echoes but connection starves. Study on social detachment by Cachopo et.al. found that self-imposed isolation triggers neural responses akin to physical pain. The brain, wired for tribe, rebels against the lie of total independence. Zetas dismiss this ache as weakness, doubling down on control. But autonomy without communion is a desert, vast, silent, lifeless. Even cacti bloom when the rain comes. Stoicism never preached detachment from others, only from dependency on others. There's a stark difference. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire, wrote of the interconnected sinews of mankind. He knelt in the dirt with soldiers, ate coarse bread, listened to grievances. A Zeta would call this compromise. A Stoic calls it clarity. To stand above humanity is to lose sight of what sustains it, and yourself. Ask yourself, what do you sacrifice at the altar of self-sufficiency? The entrepreneur who replaces mentors with rivals. The partner who confuses vulnerability with exploitation. The thinker who dismisses empathy as distraction. Each trades warmth for a cold, familiar lie. Strength is not the absence of need. It's the wisdom to choose what nourishes you. A lion hunts alone but thrives in a pride. Zetas fixate on the hunt, forgetting the pride. They gorge on power but starve on meaning. Stoics understood this. Purpose is a flame that dims, without others to share its light. There's a tale of a lighthouse keeper who extinguished his beacon to prove he didn't need the ship's gratitude. The rocks, of course, didn't care. They waited. Your humanity is not a flaw to purge. It's the current that carries you. To dam it is to drown in stagnant water. Bend, drink, let the world in. The strongest bridges are held up by the weight they bear. Chapter 4. The Blade's Double Edge. When does a weapon become a tool? When you learn to hold it without bleeding. I saw most videos on Zeta personality on YouTube, talks half stories, people-pleasing, I suppose. But I agree Zeta's indifference to crowd's preference, or even with lovers, if there is any, gives an upper hand on society. And for that, even leaders fear them. But extreme of anything is bad, you know that. In the right hands, a blade can carve paths as easily as it cuts flesh. Their toxicity, confidence, and isolation are extremes. But extremes have their uses. Sigmas might navigate subtler waters, but Zetas own the storm. Think of the scale. 70 to 80 is the sweet spot for Zeta. Anything higher than that makes up a devil, and anything lower than 65, beyond Sigma territory, makes you passive or innocuous. Where audacity meets strategy, they mimic charm when needed, dominate when challenged, and manipulate systems others fear to touch. A Sigma avoids unnecessary conflict. A Zeta creates conflict to reset the board. In crises where society hesitates, Zetas act. CEOs facing corporate mutinies, politicians dismantling rivals, artists burning old norms to ash. These are moments where Zeta traits flicker with purpose. Zeta's indifference to background noise gives them an upper hand in TED Talks, or even leaderships. Studies on functional ruthlessness by Kaufman et.al. in 2020 reveal a paradox. Individuals scoring 70 to 80 on Machiavellian scales achieve goals 22% faster than moderate scorers if they avoid tipping into self-destruction. Like adrenaline, Zeta traits can heighten focus but corrode the heart. Marcus Aurelius ruled with an iron grip during plagues and wars. A Zeta's confidence becomes toxic when untethered from self-reflection. Their isolation becomes a superpower only if they choose when to withdraw, not whether. Imagine a wolf that hunts alone, not out of hatred for the pack, but because it knows its role. But tread carefully. Zetas excel in battles, not in peace. Their sweet spot is unstable, a drug that demands higher doses. A leader who intimidates rivals into compliance might unite a fractured company. Yes, But let that same leader ignore their creeping paranoia, and soon they'll see enemies and allies, poison in praise. The line between king and tyrant is drawn in the sand, not stone. Ask yourself, what chaos in your life needs a Zeta's touch, and what needs a Sigma's patience? The parent who must sometimes be harsh to protect, the friend who claps back at toxicity with sharper wit, the visionary who bulldozes inertia. These are Zeta's strengths, but wield that blade too long, and you forget how to hold anything gently. Society fears Zetas because they mirror its own repressed extremes, yet every culture needs those who dare to break what no longer serves, even if it breaks them too. The Stoic lesson here isn't to shun the Zeta's fire, but to contain it. A wildfire destroys, forge transforms. You can rule a room without ruling over it. You can stand alone without believing you're the only one standing. Power isn't the absence of fear, it's the audacity to act despite it. Zetas teach us that, but they forget the second half. True audacity knows when to sheath the blade. Chapter 5. The Alchemy of the Unbroken Storm. Zetas are not condemned to self-destruction. Even storms have purpose. They clear deadwood, carve rivers, seed forests. The Zeta's toxicity, when tempered, becomes tenacity. Their isolation becomes focus. Their arrogance becomes audacity. But alchemy requires heat and patience. Picture a blacksmith who hurls raw iron into flames, not to destroy it, but to shape it into a blade that serves. Consider the lawyer who weaponizes his Zeta-like ruthlessness to dismantle corrupt systems. He manipulates loopholes, intimidates opponents, and thrives in chaos, but only to protect those exploited by the same games. When controlled, he's a scalpel. At 90, he'd become the disease. The difference lies in the why. Sigmas adapt, Zetas conquer. Yet conquest, when directed outward, not inward, can topple empires of injustice. A 2022 study on adaptive Machiavellianism by Lee and Patel found that individuals who channeled traits like manipulation and detachment toward communal goals, for example, activism, competitive innovation, reported higher life satisfaction than those using them for self or gain. The Zeta's fire, when aimed at external barriers, not internal voids, becomes transformative. A wildfire, contained, fertilizes new growth. Stoicism whispers here, virtue lies not in the act, but in its alignment with nature. Zetas defy nature when they hoard power, but when they redirect it, they mirror the Stoic ideal. Think of Cato the Younger, who wielded relentless defiance against Caesar's tyranny. He was rigid, unyielding, feared, but his cause was just. His toxicity was a shield for Rome, not a sword against himself. Yet balance remains precarious. Zetas in the controlled range thrive as disruptors, but the siren song of uncontrolled is seductive. It promises godhood, total control, zero vulnerability. Ask yourself, what dragons inside you could guard instead of destroy? The manager who uses calculated coldness to shield her team from corporate predators. The artist who isolates not to hoard genius, but to distill it. The leader whose arrogance is actually unshakable faith in a collective mission. These are Zetas who've met their shadows and struck a truce. Society needs Zetas, not the ones rotting in their fortresses, but those who storm walls, were too afraid to scale. The world is ruled by alphas, built by sigmas, and changed by Zetas. If they learn to wield their extremes as tools, not identities. Here's the secret. Zetas already know how to burn. The task is to build with the ashes. A Stoic doesn't fear the fire. They respect it. They tend it, bank it, let it cook their meals instead of their soul. You are not your worst impulse. You are the hand that holds it. A sword doesn't cease to be sharp when it's sheathed. It becomes wise. Zetas, at their best, are humanity's immune response. Harsh, necessary, clarifying. But immunity that attacks the self is called disease. So let your storms rage, but rage towards something, not against it. The finest steel is forged in chaos, then cooled in calm. Be the smith, not the spark. This is the end of this video. Hope you've liked it. We have many videos on Zeta personality, and compared with Sigmas and even Alphas, many traits may seem contradictory, but if you align the pieces, you'll find they are simply different sides of the same coin. These traits are not just borrowed from Reddit or TikTok. I live these traits, though refined it with my understanding of psychology. I am telling you this because I had some comments on these contradictions. We want to warn about dark sides of each and every personalities. This channel's theme is to criticize and be better, not just feeling good about the title. Thanks for watching. Peace.